right, good morning and welcome back to the morning briefing. It's Thursday, May 20th and episode 123. I'm your host, Phil Brandt, and we're happy to have you on the program with us today. With me, as always, is your friend and mine, co-host of the program, Bert Garland, shareholder with Ogletree Deacons. Welcome back, Bert. Happy to have you with us again today. It's our goal to keep you informed so you can more effectively lead your organization. All right, Bert, let's get it over with. St. Louis Blues last night, a member of the AIM organization. They're a great member. They do a lot of things right with their employees, but they're struggling on the ice. Did you get a chance to watch the game?
I'll confess, Phil, I did not watch last night. I was a little scarred from the third period of the first game, and wanted to let them get their feet underneath them before I decided to turn the TV on this time, and that never happened.
Well, you know me, I love to support all of our members, the Blues being a member, so I support them. I've watched every single game this year. I haven't missed a single game. And last night they came back strong after being down 3-0, but unfortunately, unless they pull something out of the trick bag, I just don't see them having the talent this year to compete with some of the other teams in the league. However, Elaine, I know you're listening, and your Bolts are off to a 2-0 start in a really tough battle for what I call the Florida Cup, because two Florida teams. So, Elaine, congratulations to you. If the Blues lose, I'm going to pull for you and the Bolts and our St. Louis native that plays for the Bolts. So what is his name? Help me out, Timmy. Patrick Maroon, 3-time Stanley Cup champion, if he can win this year. All right, so let's move on. Quick chat poll question for all of you listeners today. Do you plan to introduce a no mask policy for the fully vaccinated employees? And if so, will you require documentation? That is the question I'm getting from employers. Do we need to? Should we? Do we have to? So I'm asking you, are you going to implement a no mask policy for fully vaccinated employees? And if so, will you require documentation? Let's help each other out in that area. Okay, Bert, we have a ton of questions, more questions than we would be able to get to if we just read through each question one by one. And we take a lot of pride of asking each question and talking through the answers. So we're going to have to kind of paraphrase some of these down and talk to the subject this morning. But I want to begin with what Amazon is doing. So beginning Monday, here's the release statement from Amazon. And I'd like to get your take on it, Bert. So here's what Amazon has said. Beginning Monday, workers can enter their vaccine information in the Amazon employee app. Those who are fully vaccinated will receive a green check mark, which they can display entering the facility as proof of vaccination. By early June, Amazon said it will provide a badge sticker to employees to signify vaccination. And by mid-June, workers will be asked to upload a photo of their vaccination card to A to Z. A to Z is the name of their app. All right, so that now starts to feel like the conspiracy theories people talk about with you're going to have to provide proof of vaccination to go do things in the free world of the United States of America. Bert, surely you have an opinion that strikes you one way or another, and if so, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Phil. So, yeah, I definitely have some opinions on this. I'll keep most of them to myself and try to just provide a little bit of guidance from a legal standpoint to folks. So do me a favor, Phil, go read what you just read, and let's go sentence by sentence. And I have to be a little bit careful about not crossing any protected attorney-client privilege lines here. I am not Amazon's attorney, but I know that my firm does some work for Amazon. So I will be talking more generically here. But why don't you go ahead and just read through sentence by sentence what you just covered.
No, I think it's great because this is exactly what they're doing is what many of our members and listeners are struggling with, how to do this. So it's a great question. So what they're saying is workers can enter their vaccine information in the Amazon employee app.
Okay, I have zero problem with that, and I think that that is probably going to become a best practice. Not that everybody has to have an app, but that employers are going to be keeping track of which employees are vaccinated and which and who's vaccinated and who is not.
Yeah, and so what comes to mind for me is who has access to see that information, and should they have access to see it? Is it something all employees can see? Just management personnel, management of those employees of their own, management of others, because of some of the issues we've talked about. So there, for me, that's a caution, not knowing anything about how their app works.
Well, we'll talk about that as we move through these next couple sentences here, but I think just them collecting the information in and of itself is probably going to end up being a best practice.
Very good. So the next statement is those who are fully vaccinated will receive a green check mark, which they can display when entering the facility as proof of vaccination. So in my mind, the picture I'm painting is I'm coming into work. There's a guard or some validator at the gate, and I walk by and I show my app. I have a check mark. I get to go in without a mask.
Yeah, and I think that's where we start to get, a little bit into that gray area, because remember, one of the things that we have to be careful of here is creating what I would call classes of haves and have-nots. We may have a class of have-nots here, and the have-nots have not been vaccinated. They may not be vaccinated because of religious or disability-related reasons. And what I would be very concerned about with this particular process is that you have people displaying this green check mark on the way into the facility, and that may reveal possibly religious or disability related issues or concerns for those who do not have the green check mark. And so I think that I understand what Amazon's trying to do here, and I think that they can do what they're trying to do. I just think that there need to be some safeguards related to it so that, again, it's not obvious to every employee who has been vaccinated and who has not been vaccinated.
Yeah, and I think in that case, because of the way the next statement is written, it suggests that people holding their app up as proof suggest one group, and people who don't hold their app up is another group. So let's go on to the next group, right? By early June, Amazon said it will provide a badge sticker to employees to signify vaccination, and by mid-June, workers will be asked to upload a photo of their vaccine card. So I'm assuming a badge sticker is now I wear my badge. I have, a check mark says, I'm vaccinated, and you, Bert, you don't get a badge for whatever your reasons are.
Yeah, and that's where I start to get really concerned is, again, just the public display of the haves and have-nots. And if I have some sort of health condition, I'm immunocompromised, and I cannot get the vaccine because of my immunocompromised, my compromised immune system. Now Amazon is putting people in perhaps a position to display that they have some sort of disability. And I think they just need to be cautious with this approach, or any employer would need to be cautious with that approach. The fourth piece of their announcement, I have no problem with them seeking and obtaining and retaining proof of the vaccination. I think they push it with each statement up, and the first three statements, they push it a little bit further and further and further, and then you get to that fourth statement where I don't think they're pushing it at all. Statements 1 and 4 I think are fine. 2 pushes it, and then 3 pushes it, in my opinion, a little bit perhaps too far. But we'll have to see how that shakes out as things move forward. So just a word of caution to people.
And it is, for our listeners, this is more complicated than when we said, look, everybody needs to wear a mask and social distance, right? Because now we have the layers of complication here that I do believe is going to make some people unhappy. It's going to make some people uncomfortable. It's going to make managers, leaders uncomfortable. And it does become complicated.
It does.
And there is acceptable ways that have more risk than other ways that might have a little bit less risk, but there may be risk no matter what you do in this space. So this is about, understanding the risk that you're willing to take, understanding that risk. And yes, we want to take it. No, we don't want to take it. And then moving forward from there as things evolve. Let's get on to another point here. Okay, so this is another really good question, because I think it gets to the heart of what we're talking about, but explains probably the risk that we're all going to be subject to. So this question, Karen submitted this question. I think it's a great question. By definition, guidance is advice or information aimed at resolving a problem or difficulty, and recommendations are suggestions or proposals regarding the best course of action. Alternatively, a mandate like laws or regulation is an official rule that must be followed to avoid a defined consequence. That's pretty good stuff right there. That's some good lawyering stuff.
Karen's a budding attorney.
Yes. Now, many answers to the COVID-related question referencing CDC guidance and recommendations, but I feel the reference is frequently used as a mandate, i.e. the CDC says fully vaccinated people can drop the mask, but those who are not fully vaccinated must, in quotes, continue to wear the mask. Please explain an employee's risk if they choose not to implement the guidance, i.e. mask, or option to all employees and not just those who are vaccinated. Love, Karen. All right, that's a great question from Karen. So let's take an opinion on that, Bert.
All right. So first of all, let me just correct what you said real quickly. Karen's question was, please explain an employer's risk, not the employee's risk, the employer's risk if they choose not to implement the guidance. So Karen, great job of going through the definitions of guidance as being recommendations. And I'll throw a little bit of a curveball here, Phil. I'm going to jump and just talk real quickly about some Missouri legislation that's kind of made its way through. That's probably going to go into effect in August. It did not have the votes to get passed as emergency legislation, but it did have the votes to get passed and will be sent to the governor's desk for signing on during the regular course of the sessions, meaning, again, it should go into effect in August. And I'm talking about these Senate bill numbers 51 and 42. And the reason why I'm talking about this is Missouri's legislation, which is largely designed to protect businesses from claims by employees and other people related to COVID-19. And for the longest time on these shows, you think you said we're on episode 123, and I think I've been saying for probably 100 episodes that most of the liability exposure to employers is really going to fall in the area where employers behaved with gross negligence. Okay, and so then that kind of becomes the question of what is gross negligence? Well, Missouri in this proposed legislation, or this legislation, I guess, that's already been passed but not yet signed into law, what they say is that they don't use the term gross negligence, they use an alternative term, and they talk in terms of recklessness or careless disregard. Really the same standard. Have you been reckless or have you been in careless disregard? It's almost like an intentional type act, like that gross negligence. And so when Karen asked the question here about the CDC guidance and recommendations, when you are looking at potential liability exposure, if you are adhering to the guidance and the recommendations, clearly you are behaving in a manner that is not reckless or that is not grossly negligent. And the concern that I would have is that if you are not adhering to that guidance, you make an easier case for a plaintiff's attorney to come back and argue, well, the guidance from the CDC said you should be doing A, B, and C. You ignored the CDC's guidance or recommendations, and therefore you behaved in a reckless manner. And so while the laws out there, while the CDC's guidance is just that, it's guidance and recommendations, most states are saying that people should be following the CDC guidance. And I think that doing so puts you in the best position to defend claims down the road against on this reckless or careless disregard standard. And so I know it's sort of a long answer to your question, Karen. I think it's an excellent question. And during some shows coming up, I'll talk in more detail about what this Missouri legislation proposes, and which I do anticipate will be going into effect around August 28th. But I think for now, yes, the CDC is offering its guidance and recommendations out there, but to avoid claims of gross negligence or careless disregard or reckless disregard, I think you really should be adhering to that CDC guidance.
Yeah, I know the responses are still coming in, but it's interesting. I didn't expect this. It does seem to be very close to split right down the middle. There's a couple employers that are not removing their mask mandate. They're staying with wearing a mask, but most of them appear to be saying, no, you do not have to wear a mask, but it seems to be split down the middle between we are requiring documentation and we are not requiring documentation. So just to give everyone an idea of what our listening audience is doing, please keep those coming in and we'll continue to report on that. So let's go to the next question from Martin. Good morning, Martin. Martin's asking, I've read that employers should be aware that OSHA position remains that employees who are vaccinated must continue to follow protective measures such as wearing a face mask, covering, and remaining physically distant, blah, blah, blah. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so you'll recall on Monday, I mentioned this OSHA piece and that OSHA had not yet updated its prior guidance on masking, but I anticipated OSHA doing so in the very near future. Well, at about 12:30 that day, OSHA issued a statement. It hasn't updated its guidance yet, but OSHA issued a statement that very day at 12:30 that basically said it is reviewing the recent CDC guidance and will update its materials on the website accordingly. Until then, it said employers and workers should refer to the CDC and information on measures appropriate to protect fully vaccinated workers. So that statement sort of ends some confusion over whether employers need to adhere to the OSHA's January 29 guidance supporting the use of masks in the workplace after the CDC shifted gears May 13th and recommended that fully vaccinated people not wear masks in most situations. So now I'm going to go on to some notes I've compiled as I've been advising some clients on the issue. So to be clear, OSHA has not spoken definitively on the subject matter of masking and vaccinations yet. All it did was say that it was going to update its January 29 guidance in light of the CDC's pronouncement last week. And in the meantime, OSHA is directing employers to the CDC guidelines. So OSHA has not adopted requirements relating to masking. They've just given some guidance about it. And we're still awaiting the emergency temporary standard on COVID-19, which won't be published until early or mid next month. So in the meantime, I would say that OSHA is going to be very hard pressed to establish, as it will have to in order to cite employers, that maskless vaccinated employees in the workplace pose a hazard. The reason is that the CDC has essentially shut the door on that argument. So unless an employer simply doesn't want to risk what I would view to be the slim chance that it will be an OSHA test case, allowing vaccinated employees to work maskless and without distancing, I think is going to be fine. With respect to proof of vaccination status, I think the devil's really in the details, of course. What I've been suggesting to clients is that if an employer does not go to adequate lengths to ensure as best it can that those employees working maskless are in fact vaccinated, OSHA is likely to issue a citation. And I think that OSHA would have a decent chance of prevailing. So unvaccinated employees working maskless and without distancing still are recognized as posing a risk to themselves and others in the workplace, at least so long as there's at least one other employee in that same situation on the job. And if the employer does not take adequate, feasible measures to guard against exposure of its employees to that hazard, it could be subject to liability under OSHA's general duty clause. So basically, no employer wanting to avoid OSHA and other related liability like work comp claims, safety violation penalties, possible third-party claims should base its maskless working policy on the honor system. I do think that OSHA would have a chance of prevailing there. And so I do think requiring proof is the best practice. There's just too much room for dishonesty otherwise.
Yeah.
And
so
so
we have lots of comments by what you're stirring up here. But first, producer Nick, we need like a wizard hat for Bert, right? I mean, he's predicting this stuff and hours later it's coming true. So we need a good wizard hat for Bert here. But I think that the fine line that we're talking about here, I don't want that line to get lost. And what I think I'm hearing you say, you can explain differently or agree, is that it is a good practice to validate the people who are not wearing a mask. It is can create an uncomfortable workplace for people to openly display some projection that they are validated, and not just if I'm not wearing a mask, that means I'm validated, or if I'm wearing a mask, doesn't mean I'm not validated. That, I think, is that fine line. But if you're openly requiring people to display it, if you've been validated, then the opposite of that is I have nothing I could choose to display if I wanted to, even if I chose to wear a mask. And I think that's where you're saying that's where you start to separate the haves and have-nots.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we just want to be careful about that. So as we were going through the Amazon piece earlier, I think, as I said, requiring employees to disclose whether they've been vaccinated, getting proof of vaccination, I think is going to be a best practice. Openly advertising who's been vaccinated and who has not been vaccinated as of right now presents some risk. And I see some questions coming in particular from our good friend Elaine, who says that aren't we going to be distinguishing the haves and the have-nots already? Isn't it going to be openly displayed by virtue of who's wearing a mask and who isn't? The app isn't going to impact that, right? And so what I would say to Elaine is that's a great question. And what I've been suggesting to employers is that masking should still be, unless there's a safety hazard, masking should still be optional for all employees. Mm-hmm. And therefore, what you're doing by making it optional is the employees who are wearing masks under those circumstances, other employees may presume that they're wearing a mask because they haven't been vaccinated, but they don't know that for sure. They may be people who are choosing to wear a mask because they just want to continue wearing a mask and they think it's a good health practice, something that we've seen in the Asian countries for years. And so, again, what I'm suggesting here is that if you are telling employees that if they're fully vaccinated, they don't have to wear the mask, yes, obviously, those people, if they're not wearing the mask, there is a presumption that they have been vaccinated and that's been validated by the employer. But for the employees who are still wearing masks, it's optional. And we won't be distinguishing between, the reasons why people are still wearing masks. They may be fully vaccinated, but they're choosing to wear the mask. And I think that's how you can deal with that issue of haves and have-nots.
Yeah. Okay, Bert, tell me about the Ogletree chart that we were talking about pre-show.
Yeah, that's a great segue into this. Nick's going to put up the a couple of links, or actually put the live links up on the screen, and it should be in the ticker down below. But I've mentioned numerous times on this program that Ogletree has a tremendous amount of free material available to clients and other guests of its website. I'll remind people of the Ogletree Deacons COVID-19 Resource Center. And Nick will scroll down just a little bit on this page. And in particular, there are some complimentary client resources that are displayed. And Nick will click on that second one. And that second link right there takes you to Ogletree's state by state chart on orders and guidance on face coverings. And this is up to date. And like I look at the first one, if Nick scrolls through that, even Alabama, this one says effective May 11, 2021 at 5 p.m., that face coverings in Alabama are no longer required in the workplace. And this chart goes all the way through. And I think what most people will notice is that many of the red states are now saying masks are not required in the workplace. Many of the blue states, you could see California down at the bottom of this page. California is still requiring face coverings in the workplace, and there is no exception for fully vaccinated people in California right now. So as you have questions about mask mandates around the country, I strongly urge you to check this chart that Ogletree is providing complimentary. If you have questions about it, you can certainly reach out to me. But these are some of the free materials that we provide to everybody. And these are, like I said, up to date and should hopefully help people as they try to navigate this complicated area of requiring masks or not requiring masks as they get accustomed to the new CDC guidance.
Just wanted to say, just to correct. So if you go to the right of the player and there's that little check mark, that's where you can go to the links, and those two links should be up there for you.
Thanks. Not in the ticker. Sorry about that, Nick.
Checkmark does not mean that you've had your vaccination. No, I mean, it's not the Amazon checkmark. All right. Bert, one of the questions is, are there any states prohibiting employers from mandating vaccines?
There's only one right now, and that's up in Montana. Montana passed a law saying that employers may not mandate vaccinations that are still under an emergency use authorization, which the COVID-19 vaccines are. In fact, last week, I think they extended the emergency use authorization down to children who are age 12 and older. And so, again, those are still under the EUA, emergency use authorization. Once that emergency use authorization gets removed, I think the Montana law won't be applicable. But right now, Montana is the only state that says if there's an EUA vaccination out there, that employers may not mandate the employees get it. Otherwise, every other state may mandate it. Employers in those other states may mandate the vaccine for their employees, so long as you, again, are taking into account potential religious and disability related exceptions to the vaccination. And real quickly, I just want to say, all that does is it triggers the interactive process with the employee. You may not, as the employer, ultimately be able to accommodate or decide that you can't accommodate employees in the workplace who are unvaccinated. But that is a minefield that you'll be walking through, and I would highly, highly recommend that you seek legal counsel if you decide to say, we are going to mandate the vaccine. We've got an employee who can't get the vaccine because they're immunocompromised, and we don't feel comfortable putting that person back in the workplace because they're either a direct threat or we can't reasonably accommodate for other reasons. That is a minefield that you want to walk through carefully.
Yeah, Robert is asking, well, if you don't have a visible on display for his warehouse employees, a visible on display identifier, how else would you know? And one way that I can think of is, every supervisor for their employees in which they supervise could easily have a list. these people have provided documentation. That's it. It doesn't say anything about who has not, why they haven't, because I have had conversations with business professionals, owners, and HR professionals who are saying, look, I don't want to have to provide documentation. I just want to wear my mask, and I don't want to provide my employer any documentation. I don't believe they have a right to know my choice. And I think that's what we're trying to protect against. But I don't see anything wrong with a supervisor maybe having a list that they keep to themselves that say, just like they would for any other medical emergency scenarios, these employees have provided documentation. Therefore, I don't have to stop them on their fork truck and go, hey, put on your face mask. You haven't provided it.
I think that's right, Phil. I think the list could simply just be something as simple as the following group of employees are authorized to work without a mask. And it doesn't need to go any further than that. HR should be the group that's in charge of sort of vetting this and requiring the documentation and the proof, and then preparing the list to give to the supervisor. I think what we want to try to avoid is just some sort of public display of these are the haves and these are the have-nots. And I totally get Elaine's point that just by virtue of the fact that some people are unmasked, that's going to reveal who some of the haves are. But if we continue to make masking voluntary in the workplace, people aren't going to know who's wearing a mask just because it's voluntary and they want to continue wearing the mask even if they're vaccinated, and the people who can't get vaccinated.
All right, one last question. I know we're past the 8 o'clock hour. I have to get this one out there because it's a common question. Employers are asking, can I incentivize someone to provide their documentation?
Yeah,
right? I'm going to give you a gift card if you prove that you've been documented.
Yeah, the basic answer to that is yes. You want to make sure that you're, again, not running afoul of any benefits-related plans, ERISA-related plans. I know we've talked about this in the past. Chances are you're not going to be running afoul of that, but you just want to be cognizant if you're providing incentives. And the other piece I will say is, again, you want to make sure you're not discriminating against people by putting them in a position where they're not eligible for the incentive because of a religious or disability-related reason.
But aren't you in essence doing that? If I have a valid religious reason, I don't even have the chance to receive the reward because it would be against my religious belief. So therefore, you're discriminating against providing me a benefit provided by the organization.
Yeah, and so that's where I would be very careful about these incentives and just make sure that you provide for some sort of exception for religious or disability related reasons, that you're not discriminating against somebody because they can't get vaccinated.
So in that case, just give them the reward if they are in true, just say, good, here's your card and go back to work.
Yep. Possibly.
Yep. All right. Tough questions. You're in a tough spot. We're all there together. We're trying to work through it. Keep your questions coming in. We'll continue to try and address them. We still are split 50-50 between those who are requiring documentation and those who are not. But you've heard it here from our wizard, Bert Garland, the doctor of love. We'll be back on air Monday. We'll see you then, 7:30 Central Standard Time. Bye-bye.
Tell your story, promote your products, communicate with your employees and customers vividly, dynamically, and powerfully. Whether it's a company video, recruitment video, online training, or live meeting, Feature Group can help you, from scripting to highly polished finished production. Whether it's live or on demand, we have the skills and equipment to wow your audience and drive your message home. Click the link below for more information and a free quote on your next video, podcast, or live broadcast.